Hey there! In today's video, I'm walking you through this super easy watercolor night sky tutorial. It is perfect for beginners who are learning how to paint with watercolor. So let's get started.
To start off, I'm using three paints by the brand White Knights. They are emerald green, turquoise blue, and indigo as well. I'm using 100% cotton cold press paper by the brand Arches, and I'm also using silver black velvet brushes. If you're interested, all art supplies can be found in the description box below. So I started off by wetting the entire surface of the paper using the wet on wet technique. Then I added emerald green to the bottom half of the paper. Then I used turquoise blue in the middle, and then I added indigo at the top. What you're doing is transitioning from the lightest pigments at the bottom of the paper to the darkest pigments at the top of the paper where the sky is the darkest. As you can see, we're using an analogous color scheme. That means colors that are close to each other on the color wheel, and we're using cool colors because this is a watercolor night sky painting, so we want to use cool colors to create an atmosphere of darkness. So all we're doing is creating the first layer. It doesn't have to look perfect. Just dab the paint on into the sky to create that nice cloudy texture, and then once all the pigment has been added, leave it alone, wait for it to dry, and then we will go in with a second layer where we're going to darken the sky. Now we're moving on to the second layer. The whole point of this layer is to darken the pigments so that they are more vibrant. In order to do this, we are using the wet on dry technique, which means you will dilute your paint in the mixing well with some water, but then we're going to apply that paint directly onto the paper instead of wetting it first. As you can see, with this layer, the pigments are appearing more vibrant because they aren't as diluted. So this will create a lot more darkness in our sky. So we're using the exact same technique as in the first layer. You will dab the paint on into the sky using emerald green at the bottom, turquoise blue in the middle, and indigo at the top. As you can see, we're creating this really nice transition from light to dark. The goal is to darken the pigment, but then also to blend it seamlessly. As you can see, we're still using that dabbing technique so that the sky has a little bit of a nice cloudy look. So add all the pigment onto the paper, blend it together with a little bit of extra water if you need to, but don't go overboard because we still have some more details that we're going to add to the bottom and to the top of the sky. So once you've created a really nice transition, leave the paper alone, let it dry, but make sure it has dried completely because in the next section we're going to be layering trees and stars into the sky, so you have to make sure that the paper is 100% dry so that we don't end up with any smudging. And now, if you've been enjoying this video, please give it a like because it supports the growth of this channel. Alright, and so now we're on to the next layer. What you're going to do is you're going to mix the turquoise blue with the indigo to create a dark blue. You're going to use this dark blue to create a nice silhouette of pine trees. Essentially, we're creating a pine tree forest. In order to do this, you first need to draw a thin line, and this line is going to be the tree trunk. Then, you will use your paintbrush to dab the pigment onto the tree. To do this, you move in a zigzag motion, so from left to right and then from right to left. By doing this, you are creating these sporadic little branches with the different leaves on top of them. The goal here is to paint spontaneously, so don't try to be perfect. Things in nature are never uniform and perfect, the same height, the same number of everything. So don't be afraid to get fun, get messy, be spontaneous in your painting. By doing so, this will create more of an organic feel. So if you look at the painting right now, you'll see that some of the trees that I paint are tilted because in nature, not every tree is perfectly straight. Some are tilted to the side, some are bent over, some are broken. So don't be afraid to add a lot of visual variety to your painting. One other thing, make sure that the tree is thicker on the bottom and thinner at the top. The higher the tree is, there tends to be fewer leaves, fewer branches, but the lower you go on the tree, there's more of an abundance of those branches and leaves. So you'll want to make the tree look thicker and darker at the bottom. It gives it a lot of fullness, and then make it look lighter and a bit thinner at the top and makes it look lighter and airier. So when you're done that, let the layer dry, and then we will proceed to paint a second layer to create depth and dimension. Alright, so we are now painting the second layer of pine trees. When you paint the second layer, you want to add a little bit more of indigo paint to your mixing well. This will darken the paint mix because what we're going to do is paint the second layer and make it darker. So the second layer of trees will look darker than the first layer of trees. If you're not sure why we're doing this, let me explain. When you look at a scenery, right? Anything that is further away from you will appear lighter because it's further in the distance. It's a bit harder to see. Whereas anything that is in the foreground, it's closer to you, it's easier to see, therefore it appears darker. So in our painting, when we create these light versus dark values, we're creating a lot of depth and dimension. We're making our forest look fuller and deeper. So when you add your second layer of trees, make sure that they are darker, but you don't want this layer to cover all the trees in the back. So this is a great time to vary the heights of the trees, make some of them smaller in the foreground. Make sure you don't cover up everything in the background, and if you need to, go ahead and dilute a little bit of the pigment and add the odd extra tree to the background layer if you so desire. When you are done with this layer, make sure you let it dry completely, because when we move on to the next layer, we'll be adding a lot of stars to our sky, and we don't want any of the paint to get mixed up with the white. So without further ado, let's work on our night sky. Alright, so we are in the final stretch of this watercolor tutorial. To add stars to your night sky, you can use white ink or white gouache because both are very opaque and they will show very nicely, very crisply on your paper. So I'm using the Winsor & Newton white ink, and to do the splattering technique, you load up a paintbrush with the white ink, and then you use a second paintbrush to tap against the paintbrush with the white ink. This tapping motion will release the ink and it will splatter all over the sky. A word of caution is to be careful when you're splattering the stars, because if you put too much ink or gouache on your paintbrush, it can be really thick and really loose, and you might have these big globs of pigment that are too big to be stars, and it could ruin your painting. So go slowly, go carefully, and once you've splattered some stars into the sky, as you can see me doing here, I'm using the pigment that is on my paintbrush, and I'm going into the sky and adding some more stars that are bigger, because when you look at a night sky, you see a lot of variation between teeny tiny stars and other stars that are a lot bigger. This will make your sky look fuller, it'll look dynamic, like there is more distance between the big closer stars and the small further away stars. So add a bunch of stars into the sky, and when you're ready, you can draw a moon in the sky. I decided to draw a crescent moon. So in the upper right hand corner, I'm drawing a curved C shape. It kind of looks like a banana, and using strokes, very short quick strokes, I'm just sketching in the general shape before I fill it in. And once I'm happy with the general shape, I start filling it in with the white ink. You will probably need to go over it 2 or 3 times because it is ink that is very light, that's being layered over dark watercolor pigment. So go over it 2 or 3 times just to make sure it's nice and thick and white and crisp. So Before I finished off this painting, I decided to add two little comets into the sky to just fill it up and make it look more visually interesting. So what I do here at the very end is I just draw two little dots for the comets, and then I draw wispy little tails to show that they are speeding through the sky. So when you are done adding the different elements into the sky, let everything dry, and then we will proceed to the final part of this tutorial. We have finally arrived to the easiest part of this tutorial. All you have to do is carefully peel away each piece of tape from the painting. Remember to pull away in the opposite direction and go slowly so that you do not tear the paper. Then when you are all done, you get to gaze upon your beautiful watercolor night sky painting that you did all by yourself.
See, wasn't that easy? If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like and subscribe if you haven't already so that you can belong to an amazing community of artists. Now, get a cup of tea or coffee and get cozy because I have more watercolor videos for you to check out. So I'll see you in the next video.